So welcome everybody to another episode, I believe it's episode 5 now, of Retire.Army, where we discuss nice things such as retirement in the military, occasionally space age travel, VA claims, job hunting, and many more topics. Today I'm sitting here with retired Major General Joe Robinson. Joe is a recently retired general who served from 1989 to 2022. Is a native of Lubbock, Texas, graduated cum laude from Monterey High School in 1978, Texas Tech University cum laude with a Bachelor of Science in Zoology in 82. From 83 to 87, Joe attended medical school at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio, Texas. He completed his residency there in anesthesiology in 1991. Joe is board certified by the American Board of Anesthesiology and maintains his medical license in Texas and California. His professional associations include Texas Medical Association, American Association of Anesthesiologists, the Bexar County Medical Society, and the Texas Society of Anesthesiologists. Joe has had many assignments over the years, starting with the 351st MASH and the 2291st USAH out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's been an anesthesiologist at the Eisenhower Army Medical Center here at Fort Gordon, Deputy Commanding General and Commanding General of the 3rd Medical Command Deployment Support, where he retired from. He's a 2011 graduate of the War College and 2016 completed advanced professional military education at the National Defense University. Has many awards, some of which being the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, 2 campaign medals from Iraq, Expert Field Medical Badge, and Basic Parachutist Badge. Joe resides in Boerne, Texas with his wife, Sandy Whitaker. They have a son, David, and daughter, Rachel, and 4 grandchildren, the last of which was born just last year. So they're building a soccer team of grandchildren, hopefully. So welcome to the show, Joe. It's great to have you here. It's great to sit and talk with you. It's been a little while since we talked, and just want to catch up and dig into some things about retirement.
You're good, Chief. Good to see you again. Glad things are going well. Got to teach you another Hispanic word, though. It's Bexar County, not Bexar. Yes, another one of those Hispanic words down there. Of course, the other word is Boerne. It's German. There's a German history down here.
Yeah. I noticed when I was in far west Texas, out there near the border. There's a lot of German communities there as well. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning, the beginning of your journey into the military, when you decided to join, and could you place this in a context of what was going on in your life, maybe some self-talk that you had before joining the military, anything specific that triggered that event?
Yeah, my father kind of instilled a certain patriotism in me about service and about the history of this country and love of country. His father, my grandfather, which is really amazing to say, was actually a World War I veteran, but he died in 1950. In 59, never actually got to meet him. My father was not able to serve because he was born with a deformed hand, and I think that kind of wore on him that he wasn't able to serve. As a matter of fact, he got drafted at one point, and of course wasn't able to serve, but between that and a love of military history, I've always contemplated the idea of service. To be honest with you, I always wanted to be a Marine. I grew up watching all the John Wayne movies, and of course the Marines don't have medical; they get that from the Navy. And I wanted to be. I just decided to join the Army. I did that just because, for some selfish reasons. One is I always wanted to serve. The second was the extra money is going to allow my wife to be a stay-at-home mom, which is what she wanted to do, and it also paid off some of my student loans. So it's kind of a win-win all the way around. And I did that. Goodness, I was already a last year resident in anesthesiology when I did that. So I waited a long time. I was 29 years old when I joined.
Yeah, it's quite a long time, and it's interesting that you approached the military at the end of your college time. So you went straight in as an officer.
Captain, direct commission as a captain.
So now that you've reached the point of retirement, I guess that was last year sometime. When was the date?
When I retired, or when I was told or figured out I was going to retire?
When you officially were retired?
Well, it's been a whole month and 2 days.
Oh, wow. So I caught you at a great time.
A month and 3 days, 18 September last month.
Congratulations. That's amazing. So how does it feel any different now being retired, now that you're out of uniform? Is there any mind shift changes going on, anything like that?
The biggest difference is my backpack's a whole lot lighter. I've spent the last 20 years carrying a 10-pound weight computer in a backpack and a phone I rarely ever used. Um, but oddly enough, the strangest thing is it's almost as if it never happened. I've gone back to my civilian practice, and the one thing the Army does when you retire is they literally cut you off. All your accesses are gone. You can't check your emails. People can't email you. You put in that little out of office memo before you go, but the day that you retire, your email account goes away, so no one sees it again, so no one has contact with you. And if it weren't for social media, I wouldn't even know anything that's going on with anybody. It's a really kind of a strange feeling.
Yeah, you kind of get sucked into a vacuum. I say it on a couple of the other episodes as well, but I really like held on to the ID card for dear life up to the very, very last possible second. I was like, if I give this up, all my email access goes away and I lose all my contact information.
Interesting story I had with mine. I had a cat card that was going to end on the 16th of September, and I was retiring on the 18th, so I had it redone and gave me 3 more years of access. And then when I had a retirement order that nothing could be acted on until the retirement order got in, so I went into the Deer's office at Fort Gillem, and unfortunately they deactivated my cat card 4 days before retirement. So I was incredible. I lost the ability to do anything for about 8 hours. Had to go round and round with them to get another cat card just so I could, finish what I was doing. And then they would only give me access for another 2 weeks. So I was the same way. I was wanting to be able to, keep using that. But when that thing shuts off, it's over.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad to think about it, like the fact that we cling so tightly to that email, but it's really the I guess the personal connections and interactions that we've had through that medium that really make it tough to give it up. Yeah, it's also one of my hardest parts of leaving the military. Very interesting though that you said about you kind of fall into a vacuum once you leave the military, like everything just kind of shuts off and then it feels like it never really even happened. Looking back on it, that's an interesting insight on that.
I was, call it fortunate or unfortunate enough to be in the standby for 18 months between this last assignment and the previous assignment as a general officer. And so I had an idea of what it was going to be like, because I got shut off the last time too. I still had email accesses, but you just go into this black hole. So I kind of had an idea. So I'm not having quite the withdrawal that some people, I think they say they have for the first 6 months, because I've kind of experienced it before.
Right. So in the last 180 days, maybe even longer, some people say, especially from the reserve side, I've heard that it can last up to 9 months or so, maybe even a year. But in that last 180 days, maybe 9 months, 1 year, going through the process of getting out of the military, setting up everything for retirement. Were there any times of stress, relief, anxiety, happiness that happened in there, and any that you could specifically point to along that path?
Well, my time was a little different because I was teased with a follow-on assignment. And so I was kind of looking to the point of going from this last assignment to another and still having another 3 years. And it was supposed to have started last June, had it kicked off, which would have, kind of reset me for another 3 years. But then the position, this, this, the person in the position I was going to got extended 3 months. And so they told me, well, we're just going to have you sit in standby for 3 months, and then you'll get this position, or we at least think you're competitive for the position. And then, 3 months later, I called the general officer management office, and they said, oh, they've extended him another year. So it just I kept kind of getting just stretched along, stretched along. And of course, the whole time, it was never a guarantee anyway. So I'm sitting there wondering, well, the stress was, when do I start retiring? Do I need to start the process? I don't want to start the process if I'm still going to have another job for 3 years, because that's just going to be, orders get cut, then they have to get revoked. You go through all the process. And then, of course, when it became apparent that I was not going to get that next assignment, now all of a sudden I'm a little bit behind the eight ball trying to get things done. So, the biggest thing is, the job doesn't stop just because you're retiring. You still got all this stuff to do. And, we went through the last summer, as you know, in the reserve world, the summer is your AT season, your annual training season. So, things are really, really busy during that time period. So add to that all the things that you have to do in getting units, to their annual training. You still have mobilizing units. You have, on top of that, you've got to get all your retirement paperwork done. And that's really, getting the retirement paperwork together isn't that difficult. There's a checklist. It's about 10 things. You send it in, and, you kind of sit back and wait. The hardest part is you're so dependent upon other people. And while, you appreciate the help, it's, if you can't do something, you're always, nobody's more important than yourself. And, people, you have to rely on people to do stuff for you, and you're not their priority. And the biggest example of that was trying to get, things like lines of duty initiated. And those are things I'm still waiting on because of, people, basically not doing what they were supposed to do. And that was the biggest stress, trying to get all that stuff together now in a condensed timeline. And, you get to the end of it and say, oh, rats, I didn't get it quite done. But that was probably, I wouldn't say it's all that stressful, but, you want to get that stuff done because, you've got, when you leave the military, you lose so many accesses and entry points to get things done. And so now you're a little bit hamstrung trying to get things finished up. And the biggest part is, like I said, the service connection and disability issues, that you're kind of waiting to hear from. And like I thought during the course of the summer things would start winding down. You've been in the unit for 3 years, but things just kept accelerating. Things just kept happening, and you add to that trying to plan being a part of retirement ceremony and a change of command. You add that to everything in the end of a fiscal year. It was stressful for a lot of people, not so much for me, but certainly my staff trying to get it done right.
Right. Yeah, I experienced the same when I was retiring last year. We spent the better part of, the first half of the year planning and executing on the exercise up till I think it was June or something like that. And by that time, it was already like I'm within a big window that that it's closing very rapidly. So I had to like jump from that to being fully focused on that to then jump into retirement and processing paperwork and doing all the stuff that I needed to do. So I think at some point I told Captain Clark, I was like, look, at this date, this is where Chief McConnell stops being Chief McConnell in the grand scheme of things, because I really have to get my paperwork done and get things taken care of. And then like I have appointments to do. So yeah. Yeah, and the reserves adds another facet of complexity to things, depending on which side. If you're an ADR, if you're just a pure reservist, if you're on orders, like it adds a level of complexity to things for sure. I feel bad for your staff. I know they were working really hard.
Job. They did a marvelous job. My aide, Captain Mary Mann, I compliment her. You know, she was stressed to the max, but she did okay. She did fine.
Yeah, yeah, she's good. She's good at what she does. Um, so was there a favorite part of the retirement process? And so let me first step back a little bit and try to understand from the GO perspective, because I know we spoke about how the GOMO retirement process is a little bit different from anybody else who's getting out. What does the GOMO retirement process look like in contrast from your side?
Well, I'm a little bit different because I was on ADOS the last 5 months of my command, just trying to maximize everything I could. Time spent in uniform, which kind of confused a lot of people. Normally, GOMO takes care of everything. You send in the packet, and you just when your retirement comes, everything is taken care of. It was a little confusing because being on ADOS, I had to get a DD 214 if you're on orders longer than, what is it, 29 days. So you had to get a 214, and GOMO doesn't do that. So Fort Gillem falling under Fort Gordon, I had to go to Fort Gordon to get a DD 214. But they wanted me to do the entire active component checkout, which makes absolutely no sense for a reservist, because the last thing, I don't need to know about job placement services and all this because I have a job. I'm a reservist, right? So it was very, very confusing trying to get all that stuff taken together. So I wound up having to go to. We finally got it worked out. I was able to get the 214 from Fort Gordon, and GOMO pretty much handled the rest of the paperwork. The confusing part was well, the biggest stress was they won't do anything as far as your benefits or your health insurance, health care, until after they see a retirement order. So there's a gap, and that's the biggest concern that I had, was a gap in mostly healthcare services for me and my wife from the time that I retired to the time that it kicked in. And that was going to be about a week and a half. Bad things can happen in a week and a half. And so, I needed to have been a little bit more patient with GOMO. They had it in hand. There was still going to be a gap, but I kind of took a little bit of matters in my hands, trying to get the retirement order put in the system, which it caused all sorts of issues, like I was telling you about with the cat card. So some of it was self-inflicted, injury there, but normally GOMO takes care of everything. What surprised me, there are several positions, two-star positions, that are full-time. And the fact that GOMO couldn't do a 214 when they have full-time GOs on all the time, I don't understand why I had to go to two different places. I don't understand the system, but it made for a little bit of worry and angst that probably didn't need to be there.
Yeah, yeah, good. What is the saying? You create more worry by the things that you think up in your head about what's going to go wrong than what actually happens.
Yeah, but there was a healthcare coverage gap because of the way the system works. Until your retirement order is input in the system, Tricare can't see it, and you're literally without health insurance from the period of time that the order gets dropped to the time that you actually make the call and enroll. So you have to really be on your toes.
Yeah, yeah. I think I fell into that same kind of category. I know there was a little bit of a gap, and then there was also the pay thing. Like once I came from an AGR, of course, is different, but there was a little window where it was like, am I going to get paid? Do I have healthcare coverage? Like what happens if something fatal happens? Does my insurance still kick in and cover that? Like,
Found out the only thing that does work is the fact that they have your insurance, your life insurance at least lasts for 6 more months. Now, to their benefit, I did have to listen to a little um, seminar. Well, I say seminar, about a 2 hour uh, uh, sit down with GOMO where they went over a lot of this stuff. But there they acknowledge the fact that you have a gap in healthcare coverage, and that's a little bit worrisome. Can be a little worrisome. My wife is a breast cancer survivor, and heaven forbid something happens during the time that she during that gap, because that's a very expensive proposition.
Yeah. Did you have to actually go through the TAP process at Fort Gordon? Did they put you through that?
No, but fortunately, the TAP people were actually the ones that straightened the mess out for me. They're the ones that figured out what I did need to do and what I didn't need to do, and made the calls and made it happen. So I was very, very grateful for them, because like I said, I'm a reserve soldier. I have a job. I don't need to go through job placement, resume writing, or anything like that. Unless I want to try to get a different job.
Yeah. Yeah. The TAP folks at Gordon are actually really, really good. I'm hoping to get them on here eventually once I get some media access through the PAO at Fort Gordon. But I hear it a lot from reserve soldiers, especially. And it's one of those nuances where, like you said, if you do a 29-day order or anything longer, you get a 214. Um, and then that 214 sometimes triggers you going through that, that out processing and going through TAP and sitting through the lectures and seminars. And it's a little bit crazy. And then you do it multiple times over the course of, 20 years. It's a little bit strange. You were working before, like most reservists are. If you weren't working, if you were transitioning to a different specialty or field, if you were transitioning to going from working for, say, a hospital or a medical group to doing your own practice, what would you, if you had to think about that and figure out that process, where do you think you would start with that as far as maybe transitioning to another job? I know it doesn't necessarily apply, but if you did, like from the time that you retired from the military and you decided, hey, you know what, I think I'm going to start building furniture in my garage. Um, what kind of mental process would you go through to start preparing for that?
I actually had that happen to me in 2012 when I was on a mobilization and found out that my practice that I was going to return to uh, had well, the hospital gave the exclusive contract for anesthesia services to another group, and I was left without a place to come home to. So I had about 7 months to start finding a new practice, and that's how I actually wound up in San Antonio, Texas, practicing. So if you're going to do something like that, it takes months and months of preparation. In addition to, I knew I have a job here, but I also was looking at um, perhaps stuff on USAJOBS. There's a medical C did had a job opening for a physician that I was interested in. Um, Apparently, I don't know how to do a job application on USAJOBS very well, which is probably something I need to learn. People that work in the government seem to know how to do those things quite well. Put in the catchphrases, and I never got past the computer. Uh, they needed a physician, and it came back to me and said I wasn't qualified. So I still don't know what I did wrong, but it's something you have to prepare for well in advance. If, you know, especially if you're having to do a practice move.
Yeah, I feel your pain on USA Jobs. I spent the last year probably applying for, I don't know, hundreds of jobs on USA Jobs. A few of the applications got through, and then you just never hear anything about it. I'm going to reach out to somebody, maybe a couple people, to actually discuss that, because that really is a complicated thing. I guess it seems complicated. Maybe it's not so complicated once you actually understand the mechanics of it, but I obviously don't understand the mechanics of it.
Me either, because they wanted a doctor. I sent them a medical school diploma, and they said I wasn't qualified.
Maybe they didn't need a doctor.
I don't know. There was a position for a physician, and uh, they somebody that had military medical knowledge about the future of medicine in multi-domain operations. I kind of feel like I know a little bit of something about that. But apparently, I don't know those catchphrases that gets past the computer that gets you to the next level.
It's a little frustrating.
You think you're doing things the way you're supposed to. Apparently you got a lot to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one thing that I learn every day is that there's always more to learn. Like, it never stops. um, I know this may not apply from a geo perspective. It may. And I kind of take it from the pseudo idea that presidential when a new president comes into office and an old president goes out, that there's this like secret like black book that they pass on to the former president and have like a little hour meeting and discuss the presidential secrets. Is there a smart book or a process of documentation that's maintained from geo to geo that's maybe passed on, or something that maybe you put in place and passed on to your predecessors when you left your last job?
I hate the word ad hoc, but it's just basically what the sitting GO commanding general wants to do. In my case, I had a nice sit down with my predecessor. He kind of told me a few things, but really he didn't. I got not much of a formal handoff, so I decided to create one. So in the last year, things that I thought were important, I started putting down into a book, and so I was able to give my replacement a notebook of things that I thought were important, all the meetings that I do, all the teleconferences that I do, the places that I go, the things that I feel are important, the issues I think that are with the command, um, the, the the JAG issues, the IG issues, any EO issues that he's going to have to carry on. This, what we call CCIRs, Commanders Critical Information Requirements, my list of those. So I gave him all of that. So hopefully it's something to carry down and pass down so that, um, it helps them get going, to step into something. They have these used to be 3-year tenures. Your first year in any command position is just learning how to do the job, and the second year is trying to, putting those things that you've learned into place, and your third year is actually getting to see the results of the fruits of your labor. I think it's a mistake that they decreased the tenures to 2 years. I think they're going to come to wish they hadn't done that. I think I've given my replacement a good jumping off spot. I was real. I came in at a time that I immediately went to what was called ACEPT A. So from the time my first 3 weeks, I wasn't even involved with my unit, and then COVID hit. 6 weeks later. So it was a whole lot of different for me than a lot of people because we basically went onto a war footing for the first year of my tenure, making it certainly different. And I just wanted to make it so that my successor would have a good place, a good foundation to start with. I think he said he was very appreciative of it. It's almost like he didn't expect me to do something. The most important thing is the success of your unit, not your ego. So, there was never any question that my tenure was going to end at 3 years, and I had no issue with leaving. That's part of the process. But it still seemed like it was a surprise that I would take that time to do that.
Yeah, it's a very old school thing, I think, at least from what I learned when I was growing up in the military, that keeping a continuity book, keeping a soldier battle book, a smart book, like those things were just commonplace. Everybody had one. And as you rose through the ranks and became an E5 or a lieutenant or a captain or whatever it may have been, that continuity to pass on to the next person was really it was looked down upon if you didn't have something like that.
There's a lot to learn. 3 weeks before I retire, I learned something I didn't know. It's just that, it's amazing. There's too much. That's obviously why you have a staff. There's so much information. There's so many things that you're supposed to know about, that makes that job difficult, but extremely rewarding. And if you can give somebody a leg up, it's always a good thing.
It's nice to get a soft pitch once in a while. Have something to swing at. So as far as the retirement side, what is the one thing that you'll miss the most of not being in uniform anymore?
Being in uniform anymore. I took incredible pride wearing that uniform, and not to be able to put it on except for maybe special events. I've got one coming up. It's that's the hardest thing. The people that you work with, the camaraderie, the stories that you get to tell, that people can relate to. You've been to places, you've done things that no one else, that non-military people would never understand. And that's the things that I'm going to miss. But literally, the thing I'm going to miss about being out of uniform is being out of uniform.
That's a good answer. I like that. Yeah, I have a hard time picking out clothes now. I used to just be able to throw the uniform on and go, and now I have to think about clothes. But I don't have to shave anymore, so that's good.
Yeah, the big joke was, start the ponytail, the goatee, and get an earring. So it's like, well, I haven't had a haircut in a month and a half, so that's about as close as I've got. It was short to begin with, so it still looks pretty regulation so far.
Yeah, I let mine grow for about a month or so, month and a half. Mine grows really fast, and I just chopped it off the other day because I was like, it looks a little crazy. I'm gonna have to rethink this experiment. So what are you spending the time that you would otherwise be spending doing military things or thinking about military things? Have you shifted that energy to anything else? Hobbies, a project, side project?
Well, my favorite hobby is golf. I really haven't gotten to do too much of that yet. Hope to get back into it. Promised myself that when I didn't have military anymore, I was going to get good at golf. I don't think I'll get great ever, but maybe I'll get better. I live on a small acreage of land, 6 acres, and it needs a lot of work. And I incredibly enjoy just working out on my little 6 acres. And of course, all those times missed with the grandchildren, I get to make up for now. So that's basically what I've been doing.
Yeah, getting to spend time with family when you didn't get to because of military obligations. Yeah, that was one of my big motivations to actually retire.
You miss a lot.
Yeah, I missed a ton. Trying to make up for it after the fact is also not so glamorous, but you do what you got to do. Was there at any point a legacy that you thought about in your military career that you wanted to leave behind once you left the military? And if so, what was that legacy? And were you able to leave that legacy behind?
That's a tough question. What do you want your legacy to be? And when I read your question, it took me a while to come up with an answer. And the answer I came up with was, I hope people will say that I gave them the time that they needed with me. And I hope that I treated everybody the way I would like to have been treated. And I hope that I made people better at their jobs, better at what they wanted to be. And I hope that they were proud that they were able to serve with me like I was able to serve with them. They always talk about, what makes a great leader. And I'm not saying I am one, but I think the ability to be a great leader is the ability to get people to want to do their best. And if I've done that in any sort of way, then I'd say I've left a pretty good legacy.
That's a great answer. Yeah. And I obviously reached out to you. You've impacted my life in a lot of ways, especially the fact that we were serving together during COVID in a really critical time. And we were medical when medical was really critical in the United States and worldwide, of course. Um, so yeah, it's severely impacted my life in very good ways. I think you've at least hit the hammer home with me for sure.
I appreciate that.
Did you get a retirement gift? Did you go out and splurge a little money on something for your retirement, or no?
For myself, no, I didn't. I didn't. We took. We stayed in Atlanta a few days, played a few rounds of golf, and then we uh, drove home. We actually drove to from Atlanta to Lubbock, Texas, to the Texas football game. That was the first thing that I did. Played a few rounds of golf, and then I went back to work. But did I buy myself a gift? No.
Perfect. Yeah, I like to actually hear it when people say, "No, I didn't buy a retirement gift." It makes me cringe a little bit when people. I mean, it's fine either way. People, whatever is your preference, but
I was very fortunate. I received so many gifts of gratitude. At my retirement ceremony, it was an incredible event. I don't have enough wall to get it all up there. It's a very crowded wall. If I were to take the camera and show you around this room, I finally got most of it up. But I got enough stuff from enough people. I didn't need to give myself anything.
if you could think back on the retirement process, and I understand you said that the GOMO handles most of it. Um, as far as the priorities on your list, and it sounds like I'm making an assumption, but it sounds like that at least at some point the medical gap was one of the big priorities. Um, but was there a priority in your retirement process that maybe many people wouldn't consider or wouldn't think about, that was like a side effect of the retirement process itself?
Side effect of the retirement process. So can't really think of anything there. I would say the same, same thing that I always told everybody when they came home from deployments. You want to go home. I know you want to get out of here, but if you got an issue, you got to get it taken care of while you're there, while you're actually in uniform, because it becomes infinitesimally more difficult to get things taken care of once you're out. Once you're out of mob station, once you're off active duty, it's the ability to get things taken care of just increases um, logarithmically. It's that's the most important thing. And so I still have issues that I haven't gotten taken care of, mostly to do with the medical things because you know paperwork wasn't handled right, or uh, the process takes longer than you would have thought it should take. And so those are the things. If you have to get things taken care of while you're still have the ability to reach out and touch people, and I have the ability, and a part of it has to be with the fact that I can still make phone calls and people will still do things for me. They don't look at me and say, no, you're not my general anymore. I can't do anything for you. People are still helpful. People still will take care of that. But most people aren't in the position that I'm in, and they have to get on the phone and go through long wait lists and wait for stuff to happen. Uh, but it's critical, particularly with the issues of service connectability of things. And I was always of the thought that I'm not going to go for those disability things. I don't want to have a disability license plate. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. But you need to develop the attitude that you spent 20 odd 30 years giving yourself and your body to the United States government, and you hope that they would reciprocate and take care of you when it's all said and done. But they're not going to do that if you don't tell them what your problems are. And to do that, you have to do that early, and make sure you've got all the paperwork done.
when you when you did the VA process, did you do that early on? Because I mean, from my understanding from the at least the TPU side, the normal TPU side, not the general officer side. When did you do your VA at around the retirement time, or did you do it any time earlier in your career?
I did it as I developed any kind of an issue. I had a hip issue that, so I took care of that several years ago. But as you get closer to it, you just make sure that you get everything that could later on down the line be an issue. You go ahead and get that in there, and they don't, they pick up the phone, they call you Mr. Robinson. They don't know who you are. These are most people that work for the VA. They may have been prior military. You're never going to know it. You get no special treatment because you're a general officer. It's, hey, Mr. Robinson, what can I do for you today? Thank you for your service. Please do this survey after we get off the phone call. But there's no, at least not to my knowledge, any kind of favoritism because you're a general officer, and you got to go through the same paperwork as everybody else. And that the VA issue you do on your own. There's no staff to do that. You can't ask your staff to do your VA stuff. That's against the rules to begin with, and plus you don't really want a lot of people knowing what all your issues are. So
right. Yeah, it's a tricky waters to navigate. I'm still going through it myself, and it's one of the selfish reasons for this whole podcast thing as well, is to try to not only help myself to expose myself to some of the answers, but also put some of that information out there, because it's so hard to track down answers. It just seems like this infinite question mark.
Yeah, every time I've called the VA, they are incredibly responsive and nice, but it's the VA, and there's a gazillion people, as Forrest Gump would say, you're using the VA, and the process just takes a while. I didn't even know there was a thing called a benefits upon discharge thing, and so when I went to put all this stuff in, I was still within the window of using that. And my assumption was that when you're discharged, you would have an answer on your benefits and your service connectability. Well, I still haven't heard back from them. And so not really sure what that is, if it's worth doing, but you fill out the paperwork, you check the box on there that says, yeah, well, I'd like to be a part of this, but I can't tell one bit of difference as the other.
Yeah, I did the same, and I still have yet to have an answer back. I'm actually going to start revisiting that now, since I've been traveling back and forth outside of the country, to try to track that down and to demystify that process as well, because it seems from the outside, it seems like a really great thing if you understand it and you know about it, because it's kind of one of those hidden things that you just don't really know about unless you're really paying attention.
And the other thing that I've done and highly suggest people do is you need a big gorilla on your side. And, the American Legion, the Disabled American Veterans, you get them involved, because when they do, the VA starts working. They seem to work a lot faster when you've got somebody that's, an advocate for you. And I don't, there are more than just those two, but those are at least one of those I used with my issue. Find yourself that big gorilla and use them.
Have you traveled Space A at all in your past?
I never have. Honestly, I don't really plan on it unless I want to just see what it's like. I'm a creature of regiment. I can't go thinking that, number one, I can't handle rejection. So I wouldn't be able to go and then have somebody throw me off the airplane because they want the airplane instead of me. And number two is, I'm regimented. I have a schedule, and I want to keep to that schedule, and I don't want to be at the mercy of somebody else. And my occupation allows me the ability to travel how I want to travel. So I'm not so much trying to find the best deals that, I'm not stupid. I find the best deals that I can, but not so much that I'm willing to be bumped 2 or 3 or 4 times to go somewhere, because it really messes things up on the back end where you're at. And it's just not the way I work.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're not the first to mention that about having a set schedule and like needing to be, like, if you need to be at a place at a certain time, you just it and go and be at that place at a certain time. Where Space A is more of a, I call it Russian roulette, but it's not Russian roulette. It's just kind of a right place, right time, right amount of people on the waiting list. You're at the right spot in that list.
Yeah, if I ever want to just see what it's like, I might do it. But if I have to be somewhere, that is not the way to go.
Yeah, it's definitely it's really cool if you just want to disconnect and take a really long stroll through the park, and if you try to enjoy the process along the path, you'll meet a lot of interesting people. You'll discover a lot of interesting things that you never really knew about the military, especially the Air Force or the Navy. Those are the ones that do most of the space age flights, but it's an interesting journey to say the least, and it's definitely eye opener, and you get to meet a lot of really cool people along the way. So and sometimes you get to fly on a C-17 or strapped into the cargo seats.
Yeah. Well, I did that in my military career. C-17 is my favoriteest airplane in the world because it took me out of a war zone 3 times. So I love those things. So, but I don't think I love them so much that that's the way I want to travel.
Yeah, they're not everybody's cup of tea. What is your favorite thought about when you think about your retirement? What is the favorite thought that maybe comes to mind?
The ceremony itself, the I would, at my level, you get to have stuff like that, and it was a perfect evening. Um, I was surrounded by friends and family. Uh, get to come together in our dress uniforms. We get to laugh. We get to celebrate. Truly, that was the only thing. Is I'll be the first to admit I wasn't looking forward to my retirement. I didn't want to retire, or I wouldn't have uh, put in for another assignment. But it is the way things are. It works, and I have people come to me all the time wanting me to sign their MRD extensions, and sometimes we just have to say, you you got to go, and that's the way it was with me. You can't do it. If you don't leave, no one else can come up. You got to let somebody else have a chance at it. But of the whole thing, the evening of the ceremony was the greatest. It was a night I'll never forget.
Was there one particular conversation or interaction that you had on that evening that really stands out to you?
The the There's a picture of it. It's when my 3-year-old granddaughter came up to give me a gift. It was actually just a pair of little gloves that went with the rowing machine that my kids had bought me. But obviously they couldn't bring the rowing machine in there, but they brought the gloves for the handle. And so she walked up to me. I had no idea she was going to do it. And she's a brave little girl. She walks right up to me, hands me the gloves, and I just reached down to just give her a big old hug. It was very moving time.
That's amazing. That's the thing about having grandkids. Have more. So I'm going to jump into a few questions that I parsed from the interwebs. Just reached out to a good subset of warrant officers that I know and just asked them like what some questions might be. Of course, I went ahead and let you know about the questions beforehand, so there's no gotchas on this show, or at least that's not the intention of the show. Any thoughts on navigating the longer wait times for medical appointments? And the context is about 1 to 2 month lag time. Me personally, I just booked a physical here on the base, and the lag time was exactly 2 months. But even through like the VA or at a military hospital, any thoughts on how to navigate that? I know like it is what it is. You can't just force people to make things faster.
Well, first off, I think you have the ability to go outside the VA. You know, you, I personally chose, and I don't mean to be an advertisement here, but I personally chose Tricare Select so that I can choose my own provider. Do I have to pay a little bit more out of? Do I have to do copays? Yes. Is that worth it to me? Absolutely yes. I can, if the VA can't see me for 2 months, I go find me a doctor that'll see me in 2 days. That allows me the choice to do that. But having said that, depending upon what your problem is, 2 months is not all that terribly long. I was telling you earlier, my wait time appointment for a urologist here in San Antonio is 6 months plus. It's a retirement area, a lot of old men. So it's hard to get in. If you have um, emergent needs, there are ways to do things better. And everybody, this is our society. You want it now, kind of a society, our drive-through society. Um, there's no real way to make it faster except for saying something is an emergency. But you have options in that you don't have to just use the VA. You can go outside depending upon your plan, and I would certainly consider using or changing if you have Tricare Prime that mandates that you got to go somewhere and see one particular person. I remember doing that the first time, having to pick out a primary care provider. I don't have a clue who they were, and they weren't a physician. Um, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a physician. I should be able to at least talk to the person that I'm going to get assigned to. But so I chose not to do that. Now I have the ability, I have the means to be able to do that. Some people don't, but it's a possibility. Um, but I don't mean to sound mean about it, but I don't consider waiting 2 months for a doctor's appointment all that terribly bad. There's just, depending upon what you need done, so do other people.
Right. Yeah, that, and then the world has drastically changed in the last couple of years either way. So there's still the lingering, threat of future COVID breakouts and things like that. So it's not completely over yet. We're not completely out of the tunnel yet with that either. So I think that plays a little bit of a part in it as well.
As we have developed treatments and as the virus has changed, the severity of it is not near as bad. And I think we need to change with it. I would put, obviously U.S. medicine. I'm going to put above any medicine anywhere in the world. Short of Canada, um, Great Britain, but their health systems. That's a whole other topic of discussion. I'll take the American health system over any other health system in the world. I don't care what you hear over the news. Uh, I read just the other day that the wait list for procedures in England has now surpassed 7 million. For 18-month wait list, it's surpassed 7 million people. That's you don't have that here. For all the griping and complaining you have about medicine in the United States, you don't got that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they definitely work things a lot differently. And in Europe, it's even more subdivided because from country to country to country, like if you're in the EU, if you're not in the EU, if you're in Germany versus Italy versus France, it's all different. And it's kind of pseudo social healthcare. I mean, it's social healthcare, but it has its nuances. Um, yeah, it's an interesting topic of discussion.
Could spend hours on that one.
So, any thoughts on the blended retirement? If you know about it, and how it's set up, and if you think if it would be something worth engaging from, say, a VA standpoint, or even a local Legion standpoint, to re-engage, reopening the window, and maybe navigating some options to do lump sum matching and contributions to make up for lost time.
Okay. Well, first off, let me tell you, my son is a CPA. My father was a CPA. I did not get that gene. So, that as far as matching contributions, I think that'd be a great thing. But there's advantages for those of us that were too far along to be a part of it. You didn't want to do the blended retirement system. But if you look at it, regardless of which way you go, whether 20 years blended or 20 years the old system, the money that you get at the end of it is pretty much exactly the same. There was not an advantage of one over the other. Obviously, if you already had 20 years, you didn't want to do something stupid, because you haven't been putting into the TSP. Uh, you didn't want to switch to that because then you would have lost 20 years of retirement. So you didn't want to do that. But if you're starting from ground zero, um, it doesn't make a difference. The money's going to be the same either way, whether you do 20 years the old way or with the blended retirement system. The advantage to the blended retirement system is instead of, if say you don't want to do 20 years and you get out at 7 and you've been putting money in, well, guess what? You get to take that money out. Whereas before, you just walk away with nothing. At least with the blended retirement system, the monies that you put in, you get to have at whatever time you decide to leave the military, and that's awesome. Uh, the advantage of the government is they're not paying money for you the rest of your life. The advantage to you is you don't have to do 20 years. So there's good and bad to both, however you want to look at it. I say there's not really a bad to either one. There's advantages to both of them. Um, as far as a catch up, opening it up to catch up, um, you know, they got a lot of financial wizards up there, and regardless of what you do, they're not going to make one an advantage over the other. They're going to come out the same, and whichever one you choose, it's going to be a wash at the 20-year mark. They're just not going to make it so that you can dump some money into it and have one of them be so much better than the other. Now, I think in the financial world, I don't, uh, at least not in my private practice, you can't. There's rules, there's laws that allow you to do a maximum contribution every year. They're not going to allow you to exceed that in any occupation or profession. So I don't know that they may let you do a catch up to catch up to the maximum that you could do each year, but they're not going to go above that. But I like the blended retirement system for those that you get to come away with something other than a piece of paper that says thank you for being here.
Yeah, that there's definitely that aspect of it, and I agree. The being able to get out at an earlier age than actual 20 years of active federal service or 20 years of uh, whatever the service may be is an interesting way to be able to set your retirement money up and be able to get access to it. It's definitely an advantage.
And if you do the normal way, you can still do the TSP, and you kind of you can make more money that way. The only difference is you can't have a TSP and have like a 401k. You can't have both.
Okay. Any thoughts on, and from your perspective, from the general officer, general staff perspective of getting approvals for retirement and getting the paperwork to the right people in the right manner? Like what's a best practice approach to interacting with the leadership when you're deciding to retire and starting that conversation and that process?
Well, for my process, it was real easy. I sent them an email, said I'm retiring, and within 30 minutes, they sent me everything I needed. It's like, thanks for coming. It's almost like they couldn't get rid of me fast enough. Um, but somebody that's not a general officer that's thinking about it, just you have to do it. You need to do it early enough. I think they talk about a year out to start that process, and I agree with them because so many things need to be done and worked, and then you have to make sure that you got to keep up with it and check and find out where it's at. People that retire their commissions, it's kind of like 9 months in advance because it's going to take. That's about the process that it takes to have you processed out, and because of all the signatures and checks that have to be done all along the way. And again, remember, people, nobody cares as much about you as you. They have other priorities as well, and so you're not always going to be the first. You're not going to be the first priority. for them. So, the only thing that you have as your advantage is doing it early enough so that, when you find things got stuck to the side somewhere, you can, dig it out and get it back on the road it needs to be on. You don't, I don't see a lot of issues with people, fighting you to let you go. As much as we'd like to say that we're not replaceable, unfortunately we are. And there's always somebody up there that'll come back to take your spot. Do the process early, follow the process. Even if you get in somebody's hair, you gotta keep after it.
Yeah. Yeah. Follow up is definitely the key. And I agree early. I started my process probably 2 years out. And I think along the way, it was many conversations in the hallway and in the office about, hey, maybe you're going to change your mind. I'm like, nah, I think I made my mind up.
Well, the thing is, they can always rescind an order. So
Right. And I think that was the premise of the question from somebody inside of, like, if I'm the GO, or if I'm the colonel, or the captain of the company or whatever, anybody else inside of the company, maybe it's a sergeant first class or a CW2, or something like that, trying to make sure that they do the right things to get the thing signed in a timely manner, because a lot of times what ends up happening, especially from the reserve side, but on the AGR side as well, is you don't get your orders don't actually get cut till like the last possible day, and then you have this crunch time, a few weeks to get everything locked in and taken care of. So
yeah, and if you're just a normal reserve soldier, that you actually don't know the day. You can request the day, but I mean the order cut, you don't know when that's going to happen. It depends on how fast people run it through the system, and that's probably a bad part of the system. One of the issues we had in the third was I was finding out, when I first started the job, I was signing personnel actions that were initiated 3 years previous. I was signing MRD extensions, requests for MRD extensions that the MRD had passed 6 months ago. Uh, Depending upon, and that is something that I spent 3 years fixing, and we were able to get that fixed. But any organization is going to have that. The larger the organization, the larger the problem you're going to have with it. And so you have to be on top of it. It's there's so much fire and forget mentality. If you don't know that, you're just going to disappear.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's actually one of my kind of life philosophies, is like, you just have to you have to bug people to the point where they either do the thing that you're asking them to do, or they tell you to get out of their office and leave and don't come back, right? And then you have a definite answer.
Unfortunately, those people are there, and you just have to make sure they're doing their job.
Any parting words of wisdom, anything that we maybe didn't cover that you might want to cover or mention, anything that you would want to give to the audience as some parting words?
I said it before. It was never my desire to retire. I would like to have fallen dead at my desk in the office, but it's just not the way it works. And so embrace the process. Initiate things early enough in the process and follow up on the process. But just embrace it, enjoy it, enjoy your time. Don't go out thinking, being miserable because you had to quit. Enjoy the fact that you served your country for however many years you served, and walk away with all the good memories that you had. Don't ruin it at the last moment. All the other parts of it. People don't do a retirement and leave because they hated what they did. You know, Otherwise if they didn't like it, they just disappear at some point. They just go away. So you did it for as long as you did it. In my case, 33 years, 2 months, and 18 days. You did it because you loved it. So don't mess it up by being disgruntled and upset that you have to retire. Enjoy it, embrace it, and go out on top.
That's great advice. I love that. It's almost something you could put on a billboard. Uh, look, it's been incredible. I want to be very respectful of your time. I know we've blocked off enough time to do this, and I want to make sure I keep it within the boundaries of that. And of course, we can uh, go off on the rabbit holes of anything else even after this. Um, but if anybody wanted to contact you, find out about your practice, where would you point them to? Is there like a LinkedIn profile or anything where you would immediately point them to come learn more about you if they want to learn more?
So there, LinkedIn is something I'm kind of starting to get with. What I found out with LinkedIn, it's mostly where the recruiters are trying to get you to move your practice. That's really all that. Not a lot else. And the only military I see on there is people retiring. So it just keeps striking a nerve every time I see that. But, so on social media, just Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm actually Twitter account's still active. For the Army, I'll be getting rid of that one here because I'm no longer being a general. But Facebook, I've got two: the government one and my personal one. I'm still there, so they can find me there easily.
Cool. I will put all of that, all of those links and links to anything that we discussed here in the show in the comments section below. And if anybody needs anything, you can reach out and find Mr. Robinson there. It's nice to say Mr. Robinson now.
You never stop mentoring, and I'm always happy to talk to people about stuff.
That'll be it. And look, I really greatly, truly appreciate you being on the show. It's an honor. It's a pleasure to have been able to serve with you and now be able to sit with you after the fact and discuss some retirement things and some other things. It's really, really nice to keep that connection. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to do that with you today.
Well, I appreciate that, Chief. I really do.
All right. Until next time, everybody have a great one. Make sure you check in the comments if you want to leave any comments or any suggestions or anything. And with that, we'll see you on the next show.